Hey, what's up? Justin here with 65 Drums. Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to do my first impressions of a brand new electronic drum company called F-Note. They came seemingly out of nowhere with a fully fleshed out line of electronic drums. All kinds of different shell sizes, all kinds of different cymbal sizes, and an all new drum module. They did like a press release like last year, but I somehow missed it. So this was my first introduction to the brand when I got a chance to play their drums and talk to some of the people behind the company. Most of the time, I don't delve into the history of electronic drum companies when I'm reviewing drum sets. But for the sake of understanding these drums, you kind of have to know how this company came to be in the first place. So if we go back a handful of years, Roland had a lot of very talented people, and they still do. But for some reason, years ago, they started losing a couple of people. One person would leave and go work for Alesis. Another person would leave and go work for Yamaha. And then there was a big exodus of engineers and people that went and started a company called ATV, including like the godfather of the early Roland drum sets. Well, it turns out that some of the people that left to go start ATV left that company and started a company called F-Note. And this has been fairly recent. So basically, there was one company, Roland, and then there's a bunch of little mini civil wars, and now there are three companies that are not affiliated with each other in any way, shape, or form. That is my very rough understanding of the situation, and I believe there's some bad blood going on, but I don't care to talk about that because this is not a drama channel. I'm just explaining all this so that when I talk about other things in the second half of the video, it'll actually make sense. These drums come in a lot of different size ranges, and there are a couple of different tiers of drums. And here's like the potential pricing that you're looking at. Anywhere from $1,900 all the way to about $4,000. Everything I'm about to say here is subject to change, but this is what we're going with right now, and those are the prices that I was given by one of the employees at the company. The cymbals come in a wide range of sizes, everything from an 8-inch splash cymbal all the way up to a 20-inch ride cymbal. It's gotta be the biggest rubber ride cymbal I've ever played. I don't think anyone else makes something exactly like it. Usually most companies will top out at maybe 16-inch rides or 18-inch rides on the larger end with Roland and ATV. All of the cymbals are 3 zones and have 360 triggering. So if the cymbals spin a little bit, it doesn't really matter because there aren't any dead zones here. On the website, they go on to say that the cymbals are weighted specially to make them feel more acoustic-like, but to be honest, they just kind of felt like rubber cymbals to me. The hi-hat is kind of an interesting design. It's got a connector that I've never seen used on electronic drums before, and it's using multiple optical sensors to tell the difference between open, close, and all the variations in between those 2 points. The overall triggering accuracy of the hi-hat seems to be okay, however, they don't have enough sound variations between open and closed, so that makes it feel very, very rough. The hi-hat is probably one of the weak points of the drum set, and that's something they gotta fix later on with a software update. The overall triggering of the hi-hat seemed okay, it's the sounds that seem to be the weak part. But it's hard to say until like the fully finished form of these drum sets comes to market. The drums themselves are made out of 6-ply birch shells. They have 2-ply mesh heads on them, which felt pretty good. They weren't overly bouncy, they were just kind of like average, decent mesh heads. If you take off a mesh head, you'll see that they're using multiple triggers hugging the rim of the drum on the inside. That way you don't really have hot spots in the middle of the drum, and you get even triggering across the entire surface of the drum, unless you play on one of those individual points. This looks very, very similar to what ATV does on their drums, which we'll talk about later on in the video. On the snare, they're using a secondary raised rim just for cross-stick sounds, so you don't have to press a mode button like you do on Roland drum modules, at least the lower end ones, to switch between cross stick and then rim shot sounds. It just does it automatically because there's a secondary sensor there. This again is also very reminiscent of ATV drums. So moving over to the drum module, this is a very, very compact box with a lot of inputs and outputs using 2 cable snakes. This is the first drum module that I'm aware of that has an e-ink screen. So it kind of feels like you're using a Kindle tablet in order to switch between drum sets. This of course has pros and cons. On the plus side, I like the fact that you can actually see a lot of information and the fact that it is a touchscreen. I like all of that. I like the fact that it doesn't draw attention to itself because it looks like a piece of paper sitting next to your drum set. It looks like a Kindle. However, on the downside, the touchscreen is not as responsive as one that's on your smartphone or your iPad. So I felt myself having to press a little bit harder or press the screen just right on occasion in order to switch between kits and different settings. Now moving on to the internal specs of the drum module, over USB you have 8 channels of audio out and 2 audio in channels. It has Bluetooth built in so you can connect your cell phone and play to stuff over Spotify. And if you have a headphone jack in your cell phone or an adapter, you also have the aux input so you can have a hardwired connection if you want. As far as MIDI goes, you have a classic MIDI out port, you also have USB MIDI and Bluetooth MIDI in and out. As far as outputs go, you have an 1/8 inch headphone jack, and you also have 2 1/4 inch outputs that would go to speakers, for example. According to their website, you can adjust tuning, muffling, and EQ for each individual pad. There's a training function, there's a recorder function, There's a metronome that lets you route where the metronome is actually going to be played from, so it can just go to your headphones, for example. As far as sounds go, you honestly don't get that many. According to their website, you only get 10, and then you have 40 slots to mix and match sounds to create your own user preset kits. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the buzzwords that they use in their advertising. Every company tries to use really fancy words to describe what's going on inside of their module, so let me give you a basic translation. In their advertising, they say that there's an Elise sensing processor inside, a stroke analyzer, high-speed sensing and sounding, true EQ sound technology for wide dynamic range, and natural sounding. There's a high-end DAC and high-grade electronics inside. Essentially, what that means is that they're claiming it has very low latency, it can accurately pick up what you're playing, and it will accurately give you a sound that will represent that best. Now let me talk about some of the things I liked and kind of didn't like about these drums. First of all, I think the cymbals are great. I like the fact that they're 360 triggering. I like the fact that they're all 3-zone. The drums themselves seem to be pretty nice. The look worked for me. The internal sensors that they have, we've seen them done before from other companies. It usually just works. As far as the drum module goes, I'm a little more 50-50 on that. The sounds aren't really the sounds that I personally go for, and it doesn't work in every genre of music. They need to have more sounds included to really cover everything. They also need to add a compressor option on the inside so you can really fine-tune the drums and make them sound a little bit more punchy and a little more, basically give you the ability to process them a little more. I like the fact that the module has a touchscreen and can really show you a lot of information all at once. They're not relying on those terrible LCD screens from the 80s that everyone still uses for some nonsensical reason. But on the downside, the screen isn't as responsive as I would like. It's not like pressing on a cell phone or a tablet. Sometimes you can not press hard enough or hit it with the wrong angle of your finger and it just won't, switch to the next kit. I was also very surprised at how many pads you could plug into this drum set. You really can plug in plenty of cymbals and drums. I also really liked having that cross-stick feature on the snare. It just makes doing cross-stick a lot more accurate. Now on the downside, I do have several problems with this drum set. I feel like the hi-hat is like the biggest weakness right now because they don't have enough sound layers between opened and closed. It is not smooth at all, and it's just something they need to work on with a software update. And also the triggering on these drum sets was not quite perfect. Basically, their stroke analyzer that they talk about needs an update. Most of my problems are on the module side. The hardware itself, like the cymbals and the drums and the mesh heads and everything, that all seems to be working fairly well. But the larger issue that I have with this drum set comes down to the fact that when I sit down and play these drums, it just feels like I'm playing an ATV drum set with a white coat of paint on it. Whenever I see a bunch of people leave a company and start their own brand new company, my main hope is that they're doing it because they have a lot of bold, innovative ideas, different ways of doing things. They felt held back and they really wanted to just, turn the industry upside down. But with this company, apparently they were very happy with a lot of things ATV was doing. They loved the sensors, so they just used the exact same setup. They like the cymbals, so they make something that is very, very similar. Let me give you some actual specific examples. ATV uses 6-ply birch shells on their Edrums Artist series. And this new company, F-Note, also uses that exact same number of plies and that exact same wood type. ATV uses a secondary raised rim for the snare just for cross stick. They're very, very well known for that. And this new company is doing the exact same thing. ATV was the first company to use an optical sensor for the hi-hat, and this new company, instead of just using one optical sensor, they're using multiple optical sensors. But it's still that same sort of technology, just in a slightly different way. One of the biggest things to me is that the internal triggers, just the mount for the triggers, looks pretty much identical to me at least. The underside of those cymbals also looks strikingly similar to me. And I could play devil's advocate if I wanted to. I could say, for example, well, ATV didn't invent the optical sensor. It's been used in many other industries. Or I could say that, multiple companies are using more than one piezo for the head zone because it's such a big surface, you need multiple triggers in order to cover it and give even triggering across a big surface. A raised rim has been done in acoustic drums before, so why not use it in electronic? It's just common sense and gives you an isolated extra zone. But the problem is, it's not that F-Note is using one or two things that are similar, they're using a list of things that are very, very similar. Whenever you leave a company and start your own company, You need to go out of your way to make everything you do a little bit different from the company that you came from. I'm not saying that F Note is a pure clone of ATV. There are some actual legit differences between these two companies. I'm just saying they need to find a unique identity of their own and really lean into that and try to make triggers or something that don't look exactly like the company they just left. It just looks bad. But regardless of any similarities between these drums and some other drum sets, I feel like they have a good starting point here. It's not perfect yet, they still have to work out some of the kinks, but I think that as time goes on and as they continue to improve these drums, it could be really something worth looking into. We'll have to see what happens over the coming years and whether or not drummers respond positively or negatively to these new drums. I enjoyed using them and we'll see what happens. Hey, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. I really do appreciate it. Have an amazing day and I'll see you guys in a few.